Beijing, China. Off-duty soldiers of the People's Liberation Army are mingling with tourists in what passes for normal at one of Beijing's beauty spots. In June, they were crushing pro-democracy demonstrations around Tiananmen Square with tanks and guns. Tonight, in the world's first documentary filmed inside China since the massacre, World in Action reports on the despair of the democracy movement, reveals from the inside the secret workings of the Chinese leadership, and discovers the terror that still grips Beijing. Last month, we went into China with hidden tourist cameras. The square that had seethed with student protest in the Beijing spring was almost deserted. The young people of China, whose joyful demonstrations for democracy were witnessed by the world, have disappeared.
Beijing is in a state of terror. Every day you hear of people being arrested. Everybody's scared. You hear of people who have been shot.
The crackdown is absolute. Troops are encamped in residential districts and armed police are everywhere. A network of informers based on the red armbanded district committees keep watch on street corners for any public display of dissent. Activists who are involved in the democracy movement have been executed, beaten or imprisoned. Others have gone underground, and World in Action has tracked down students and workers still in hiding from the regime. Tonight, they tell the world their story for the very first time. In a series of clandestine meetings, they've described the terror that began that night in June and has continued ever since. Dissidents like this student on the run are wanted men. They're risking their freedom to get their message out, so we've protected their identity.
The suppression is nationwide. It's against students and anyone who joined in the movement. There have been searches, arrests and executions. They will spare no effort. They will leave nothing to chance. The Communist Party wants to exterminate all democratic activists.
Two other pro-democracy supporters, a teacher and a worker, agreed to drive us down the long avenue that leads through Beijing into Tiananmen Square.
On the 4th of June, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, people were crushed to death by tanks here. The authorities didn't allow their bodies to be removed. It wasn't until the 5th of June that the bodies could all be taken away.
Today, there is little to show that this was the scene of a bitter battle. Workers tried to stop the army here on its way to clear the students from the square more than a mile away. Stray bullet holes are the only memorial to the dead.
There were more than 10 students here who tried to resist the armored personnel vehicles with their bare hands. They were shot with rifles, and then the tanks rolled over their bodies.
By the time the army had descended on the students, here, on the square, at least 1 million people had taken to the streets of the capital.
When we moved towards the west side of the Great Hall of the People here, I saw people loaded 2 or 3 at a time onto stretchers to be sent to nearby hospitals. Some of them even had their intestines exposed.
This personal eyewitness account contradicts the government propaganda which denies that anyone was killed on the square.
If they open fire, they open fire. If they kill people, they kill people. It doesn't matter how many they kill, whether it's hundreds or thousands. They open fire on unarmed people. And that shows in itself that the government lacks any humanity. We simply couldn't imagine that this could happen in this day and age.
No one had the vantage point to see all the killing on the 100-acre site. But another eyewitness, a student, could not have been closer.
I was carrying a student as he was actually shot in the belly. That was at about 4 a.m. At around 5, we retreated from the east of the monument to the people's heroes in the center of the square. I was at the back and I could see a mess behind me. Some students were being shot at. Some had their brains blown apart, and I could see 2 very young girl students being beaten up. In fact, one of the female students had already died. When we carried her away, we could see that she was already dead.
In the confusion after the massacre, some of the leading students were able to take refuge in foreign embassies and skip the country. But we were taken to see one of the thousands of others who had no choice but to stay.
I retreated from Tiananmen Square on June the 4th. At that time, the most important thing was to let the entire nation know about what had happened. So some students went out from Beijing to the remoter areas to spread the news. Of course, the whole trip was very dangerous, and some of the younger students were arrested by the local police. They even killed some of them. I know that there were students killed in Hubei and Fujian.
Did any incidents like this happen in Beijing?
Too many, too many.
After the first wave of the roundup, the parade of suspects on TV, show trials, and execution. But the hunt for suspects was often random. Old scores were settled among enemies. Rumor was rife. Martial law troops would arrest people on the nod of a neighbor.
A colleague of mine, his brother was arrested by the public security officials, but he had taken absolutely no part in the movement. That's the truth. Maybe someone had given them false information, but they didn't ask him any questions. They just beat him up. They killed him. Afterwards, the government apologized to his family and compensated with £4,000. They also gave the family a lot of coupons so they could buy things like television and a fridge.
The government's propaganda machine soon got underway with their version of events. Pavement exhibitions denounced the democracy campaign as counter-revolutionary. They highlight the deaths of 37 soldiers and ignore the slaughter of students. The events have become another part of the army's heroic history. Parties of school children and students are bussed into Beijing to see burnt-out tanks on show outside the military museum. It's become a regular Sunday outing, but some of their colleagues are missing.
In my class, 6 students have disappeared. I think one of them might have escaped, perhaps to Hong Kong. another has certainly been killed, and another has been arrested. If there are 6 missing out of one class in one faculty, and there are 12 faculties in the whole university, that amounts to an awful lot of people. Some students have had mental breakdowns. A doctor told me that after they were admitted to the mental hospital, they had to be tied to the beds and injected with tranquilizers to keep them calm.
The moment anyone returns to university after the vacation, they are being investigated. The authorities call it cleaning. There are a lot of different tactics. For example, in Beijing University especially, they will encourage students to write reports behind each other's back. It's called mutual exposure.
We've been under 3 weeks of political education, during which we've had to learn by heart certain documents and speeches of senior officials. Altogether, we've had to write 3 reports. The first one covers the period from the 15th of April to the 4th of June. It's a daily account of yourself. You have to find someone who can prove you were where you say you were. Second, there is a self-revelation report. You've got to write everything that came up in your mind in those 50 days. In the third report, you have to give your definition of democracy and what means you think should be employed for us to achieve democracy in a socialist country.
At the place where the terror began, the authorities are still taking no chances.
Can I come in with a passport?
No.
No.
I was told that if I had a passport, I could get a ticket.
In the days leading up to the 40th anniversary of the Republic on October the 1st, a heavy military presence barred anyone from the square without special permission. The government is going to almost any length to eliminate dissent.
I had a friend who was a driver. He took part in the movement. He was at an incident and later told the truth about what he saw. A 9-year-old child had been killed by the troops. A bullet went through his chest on the left-hand side and came out on the right-hand side of his back, and there was a big hole in his body. All the hospitals were full at the time because of the fighting, and there were no vacancies. All the mortuaries were full too. My driver friend took the charge around town trying to find a mortuary that would take him. Later, when he told this story, he was labelled a rumour monger and arrested, and I haven't heard of him again.
No one knows how many have perished in the roundup since June the 4th, any more than they know the death toll during the massacre itself. Many bodies have been burned secretly by the authorities inside this crematorium.
There is no way you can work out a figure. A lot of people are missing, but no one goes to report such deaths. There is no one who would dare ask whether one of the family members had been killed.
The nearest escape route from China runs to Hong Kong, the British territory due to be returned to China in 1997. With the financial centre's anxiety about its future, the Hong Kong government tries not to embarrass its future masters by flaunting dissidents seeking refuge. So even here, they're not free to speak openly. This young man, from a well-connected family, was a junior official in a Chinese government ministry. His experience of observing senior leaders at first hand made him join the students' cause and gives a unique insight into the motives behind the democracy campaign.
There is an old saying that the best thing in life is to be an official. From what I saw, they wasted so much money in eating and dining, and the cultural level was low, even lower than me. There had been bandits or soldiers in the past, in the earlier days of the country, and they may have been very courageous during the war. But I don't think they are the people who can really manage China after the country became stable.
The most powerful man in China is Deng Xiaoping. It was he who ordered the army to crush the demonstrators in June. The senior Chinese leadership is still dominated by these old men, who go back to the long march and revolution of more than 40 years ago. In spite of pragmatic reforms to modernize the economy, Deng has done little to stop the corruption which runs rife among China's million party or state officials. Apart from straightforward lining of pockets, officials are granted privileged access to consumer goods which are not available to ordinary citizens, even if they could afford them.
If we workers want to buy a color television, we cannot get it in the shops. But the officials can. They buy hundreds or thousands of sets with special coupons. They can then sell them and earn a lot out of it. So we have suffered badly, and so we agreed with the student protest against official profiteering.
Anti-corruption was a major slogan for the democracy sit-in on Tiananmen Square, and self-criticism speeches by government leaders after the crushing of protest have done nothing to satisfy demands.
When we talked about corruption, what we had in mind was solving the problem at the roots. We wanted to push the democratic movement forward, but the leaders just talk about not using their luxury cars or eating special food.
I think what really matters is official profiteering. That is corruption through formal channels, actually snatching money from the people. And of course, people are very bitter about this. In China, corruption, financial corruption is closely related to political corruption and the rule of party dictators.
Here in Beijing and other Chinese cities, the country is undergoing a consumer revolution led by Western investment. Western-look hotels and ritzy joint venture business centers have mushroomed in Deng's open-door policy to attract foreign capital. China's rigid suppression of democracy provides the sort of stable environment that businessmen like. In spite of international outrage at the Tiananmen massacre, they're looking for more opportunities. At the moment, a British trade fair is on show in Shanghai and other cities. Democracy activists note the irony of economic expansion going hand in hand with political repression.
Foreign investors like a stable environment. I think the Chinese people want democracy and a stable environment. As a foreign investor who would like to invest in China, it is easier for him to do so under the Deng Xiaoping era. As China's economic development leads to more calls for democracy, this may clash with the interests of the foreign investor.
The Chinese leaders have never been more remote from ordinary people. The back streets of Beijing are a world away from the security-conscious compounds of the top officials. The most secretive government in the world is carried out by cliques of old men behind the walls of privileged apartments. The ex-ministry official we spoke to witnessed the wheeling and dealing of Deng Xiaoping's clique.
Those who had the power were the old people, and they would already decide on a policy before the meeting started. From my position, I could see that a lot of major policies in China were decided and solved while Deng Xiaoping was playing the Chinese game Mahjong. They achieved a consensus at the Mahjong table, and when they went to the formal meeting, they would be all on the same side.
Are you seriously saying that the fate of over 1 billion people in China is decided around the Mahjong table?
Yes, it is. That's exactly what they do.
Back in June, at the start of the killing, there was a moment of uncertainty when sections of the army might have refused to obey orders to crush the students. If the Mahjong mafia had lost its grip on the people, they had a ready escape route via Beijing's underground system. Beneath key government buildings lies a secret line which links up with the public subway to take the leaders out of Beijing to an army base buried under Zishan Mountain to the west of the city.
I've been very close to senior government officials. I've worked in the government. I went to Zishan base and took the underground trains. I know about the underground military links. They have a big headquarters at Zishan. They have hospitals and army camps there. They are using these facilities built up by the Chinese people to make their last stand. But this last stand was not to protect China from foreign invasion, but to fight their own people. And I think this is really shameful.
On October the 1st, China marked the 40th anniversary of the People's Republic in Tiananmen Square. But Beijing citizens were not invited to the party. Instead, the People's Liberation Army put on this formation disco display for government leaders and their guests. They call it loyalty dancing. The ordinary people had to enjoy the fireworks from afar, under watchful eyes. The celebrations barely concealed the atmosphere of fear.
A line from a well-known poem goes, "Listen for the most terrible thunder at the deepest quiet." It means we are waiting for something to happen. Apparently everything is quiet now, because we have to obey, but everybody is waiting.
The government is anxious to persuade the world that Beijing is getting back to normal. Tiananmen Square is slowly being opened to more traditional pursuits. Martial law authorities have so far prevented even the smallest resurgence of protest. As for the democracy movement, the courage of those who fought in the past is tempered by the realities of the present.
The Chinese have a saying. We say we might as well be dead. We say that if we are not afraid to be alive, why should we be afraid of death? But we should have no unnecessary sacrifice now, because this will affect the development of the movement. We have laid the necessary framework for democracy. People have already sacrificed. If we sacrifice unnecessarily now, it would be a waste.
All our pro-democracy groups have gone underground. It is very difficult to contact people, especially under the highly repressive policy launched by the government. People fear informers and are very suspicious of each other.
But will there be any people organizing such activities?
Yes, personally, I would say that we must continue this democratic movement until victory arrives. Whether we have a lot of people or just few people, we must continue with our work. because this is a movement for the entire nation.
Evidence collected by World in Action is to be submitted by the International League for Human Rights to a United Nations inquiry into the Tiananmen massacre.